Attorney General Pam Bondi was just confirmed by a vote of 54 to 46. Joining me now, Chris Bedford, author of Beltway Brief. Chris, the lone Democrat to vote for Bondi was Senator Fetterman of Pennsylvania.
Why was Chicago singled out in the lawsuit today against sanctuary cities?
Look, sanctuary cities are sanctuary for criminals. I'm glad we got Pam Bondi running the DOJ now. Sanctuary cities are sanctuary for criminals. Make that clear.
Pam Bondi, President Donald Trump's nominee for Attorney General, has officially been confirmed by the Senate. And on her first day in office, she decided to ban sanctuary cities from receiving federal aid or any federal resources. This has placed Chicago in particular in quite a bit of controversy and hot water. But before we get to Chicago and Illinois in particular, here's what Bondi is up to more generally as it pertains to undocumented immigrants and the various sanctuary cities and states that are attempting to protect them. So Fox News Digital exclusively obtained memos outlining Bondi's first day directives. And here's what we know based on their reporting. So Bondi has directed the DOJ to pause all federal funding for sanctuary cities. Bondi also has directed the DOJ to identify and evaluate all funding agreements with non-governmental organizations, NGOs, typically nonprofits, that provide support to illegal aliens. That's how Fox News reported it. She's also directing litigating components of the Justice Department to investigate instances of jurisdictions that are impeding law enforcement and directing they be prosecuted when necessary. So I'm gonna pause. There's more that she's doing. Honestly, there are some things that she's doing as part of her first day directives that I agree with. What I just read to you, though, I disagree with, and here's why. The idea that the citizens, the tax-paying American citizens in these sanctuary cities should be deprived of federal funding is ludicrous to me. Because if that is the case, well then we should stop paying our federal taxes. Not everyone living in these sanctuary cities co-signed to the sanctuary status, number one. But even if they did, they're paying their taxes. Living in California, we pay taxes up the wazoo, right? Obviously state and local, but I'm separating that out. We pay our federal taxes. Oh, so we're gonna be barred from receiving federal funding because Pam Bondi doesn't agree with what some of the lawmakers, in these cities and in these states are doing? Okay, we'll take them to court. Deal with it that way. But to deprive American taxpayers of the resources that they have paid into the system is unacceptable to me. Cenk.
Yeah, there's a silver lining here. You might be surprised to hear. And the silver lining is that, of course, it's going to go to court. The sanctuary cities will sue to get funding that they're owed. And so now what I'm very curious about is how the courts are going to decide. Because remember, guys, at this point, you've got a Republican president telling basically blue cities that you are not allowed, and blue states, you're not allowed to have jurisdiction here. The federal government has jurisdiction. So we will make decisions and we will deny you aid based on federal decisions, and at the local level, you'll have to accept it and like it. Well, if you say, well, okay, yeah, but now Trump has stacked the courts, and especially if this goes all the way to the Supreme Court, they have a huge advantage. They'll just vote against the local cities and states. Yes, but if they do, when a Democratic president is in charge, as Biden just was, and then Texas says we're not following your laws and we're not following your rules, then the Democratic president can block all funding going to Texas. Yeah. So which way is the Supreme Court gonna go? And so remember, conservatives theoretically in favor of state rights, and the more local, the more power they should have according to conservative ideology. But now they don't like when states disagree with them or cities disagree with them. So they're now saying, no, you shouldn't have any of that power. We should be able to withhold your funding. Be careful what you wish for, because the minute a Democrat gets in office, then he could withhold funding from all of those red states and red cities. And by the way, can they come up with an excuse like Pam Bondi did? Yeah, and you might like her excuse and you may hate the Democrats' excuse. But either way, the rules will apply to both parties.
But honestly, if we're not going to benefit from the system that we contribute to as federal taxpayers, then why are we paying our federal taxes at all? Yeah. I mean, it's out of control. So that's what she did on her first day that I disagree with. Let's talk about what she's doing that I don't have a problem with. You guys might disagree, but let's get into it. So she's going to war with cartels by directing the Department of Justice to work closely with other federal government agencies in order to ensure that members of various gangs and cartels are caught and prosecuted and later deported. So she wants DOJ to work closely with the Department of Homeland Security to eliminate the threat cartels and transnational gangs pose. Bondi plans to reimagine charging priorities relating to those cases in order to ensure that law enforcement resources are focused on dismantling the foundational operational capacity of cartels, as opposed to just picking off low-level offenders. I am totally in favor of that. So this is how she plans to do it. Currently, there are two task forces that are focused on the criminal gangs and the cartels. There's Joint Task Force Vulcan, and that was specifically created to go after MS-13. She wants to expand that to also include Tren de Aragua, which is the transnational Venezuelan gang. There's also the Joint Task Force Alpha that was created to fight human trafficking. And so she wants to kind of bolster these groups in order to be able to do their jobs more effectively. Those missions are expected to expand in order to deal with, the threat that the actual violent criminals pose within our borders. Also on the cartel front, Bondi is directing the DOJ Office of Legal Policy to find legislative reforms to target equipment designed to make fentanyl pills and add xylazine, a new deadly drug, to Schedule 3 of the Controlled Substances Act. So before we pivot to Chicago and what's happening in Illinois, what are your thoughts so far, Cenk?
Yeah, on those proposals, devil's in the details. So if they stick with the law and the Constitution and they want to get tougher, and they've already done it with MS-13 and it passed legal muster, then fine, no problem. If they go beyond that, then we would have a problem. So look, in terms of immigration overall, I just want to set people's parameters and have it be realistic. So people who violated the law here, who were undocumented immigrants, felons and above, for sure, goners. So if you think, oh no, that we should somehow spill into the streets and protect them, it's not gonna happen, and Americans don't want it to happen, and all the polling is super clear, so they're gone. For people who've been here a long time, I would be really surprised if they got to them. But there's a giant 1.4 million in the middle that have gotten a court order that they must be deported, they must go back. They haven't committed any extra crimes, but deported because they are here illegally and there is a court order. They're gonna go after those 1.4 million. And then public opinion, is my guess, will decide how much they go after that 1.4 million. Because that's gonna create a lot of bad optics. And so are the American people fine with it, or do they draw the line at some point? And does Donald Trump care about his popularity enough for him to listen when people draw the line? But when they're going after sanctuary cities and just criminals for now, that'll definitely be popular.
So let's talk a little bit about what's happening in Chicago. I focus on Chicago because while Biden was still in charge, there was a lot of controversy in Chicago in regard to the influx of migrants who came in. Many in the Black community in Chicago were furious. They felt that they were being nickel and dimed while migrants were being given shelter and things like that. And so that led to a lot of headlines, a lot of focus and attention on Chicago being a sanctuary city. And it doesn't surprise me at all that the federal government under Donald Trump is hyper focusing on Illinois, but mostly Chicago. So the federal government is already making moves on Chicago because of the fact it's a sanctuary city. The Department of Justice has filed a lawsuit against the state of Illinois as well. The city of Chicago and Cook County, which of course is the county that Chicago is located in. And they're doing so due to the sanctuary laws that protect undocumented immigrants. So the DOJ argues that these sanctuary policies, quote, interfere with and discriminate against the federal government's enforcement of immigration laws. And Governor J.B. Pritzker and Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson are both targeted by name in this suit. So here's what the suit says. Upon information and belief, the conduct of officials in Chicago and Illinois minimally enforcing and oftentimes affirmatively thwarting federal immigration laws over a period of years has resulted in countless criminals being released into Chicago who should have been held for immigration removal from the United States. So the argument is that these, criminals were put on detainer, but rather than detaining them after they serve their sentences, so ICE can deport them, the state of Illinois and the city of Chicago did the opposite and essentially did not follow through with those detainers. Now, when it comes to those who have committed crimes, and I'm talking about crimes outside of being in the country with undocumented status, the DOJ outlined how over 13,500 illegal immigrants were detained by ICE officials between 2016 and 2025 in Illinois, along with 11,036 detainers lodged for individuals held by law enforcement. And what they claim is that some were accused or convicted of serious or violent crimes. And the complaint gives examples of when some individuals were released because detainers were allegedly ignored. So that is the crux of the lawsuit that the Department of Justice under Pam Bondi has filed against the state of Illinois, the city of Chicago, and Cook County. Cenk.
Yeah, I don't know who to believe here because we got a bunch of politicians on both sides. So Pritzker is saying, no, if they're coming to pick up criminals, we already let them do that. And the federal government says, no, you don't, not really. So I don't know. Yeah.
Can I weigh in on that real quick? I don't know about Pritzker, but in regard to Mayor Brandon Johnson of Chicago. So during a recent press conference, he was asked, Donald Trump gets elected and then Tom Homan shows up and he arrests all of these dangerous criminals. Like, why weren't you able to do that as mayor? And I kid you not, he literally responds back to the reporter and says, because that's not my job. So he acknowledged that it was true, but says that it is not his job. He feels that it is the job of the federal government to do these deportations on their own without the help of Brandon Johnson.
Okay, I mean, we all saw that. Well, I don't know if we all saw it, but a lot of us saw that clip of Dr. Phil doing this in Chicago. And one of the guys that they catch is a repeat offender for pedophilia. So I hope that's your job to take guys like that out of your city. And so, okay, like I get what he's saying. He's saying it's the federal government's job. But then when the federal government says, let me do my job and take dangerous convicted criminals who are undocumented out and deport them, and he says, I'm not going to help you, not a great look. And so if you're like, no, I resist at all costs, and we've got to protect every single undocumented immigrant, and no Chicago, et cetera, shouldn't work that with the federal government, even in that kind of extreme scenario where these are felons that have been convicted. Okay, but everybody's got a different opinion. It's a free country, but that's not where the American people are. They're very, very, very far away from that opinion. And so, and my guess is that and I haven't seen polling on this, but in Illinois and the city of Chicago, my guess is that the citizens are very far from the mayor's opinion on that. That the citizens would probably very much welcome that. I could be wrong, but I would be very surprised. So, look, guys, sanctuary cities, when they protect people, for example, who report crimes, yeah, they're undocumented, but they just reported a sexual assault. You want them reporting that sexual assault. It makes sense to protect them. That part of it makes sense. The part where I'm not gonna work with the federal government to take out this rapist and deport them, that doesn't make sense. So we should get back to sanity and doing things that make sense so that we have the moral high ground and you could protect more people from these raids when they start going out of bounds and start doing things that are unpopular and immoral. But right now, if you fight on these grounds, as Mayor Johnson's doing, I think that's losing ground. I'm not in favor of it.
Thanks for watching. If you become a member, you get to watch all this ad-free, except for, of course, this ad. Still, hit the join button below.